Thanks, Liam. We did have some very interesting discussions. We had two quite different groups, I'd say, and lots of areas of commonality, but some areas of difference as well. There were some key culture and organisational issues that we've probably stolen a little bit from the last group as well that came up in relation to the development proposal and assessment area. There was a sense that the capacity at all levels needs to be built, that there needs to be clearer clarity of roles in the process, and what was termed by some participants as a culture of consistency across development assessment needed to be enabled. There was a lot of discussion about the certainty and flexibility and getting the balance of those right, and pre-DA processes were seen as very crucial in that role. The groups also saw a role for the department in facilitating contact between councils, proponents and other agencies in that pre-DA phase, particularly for regionally significant projects. This was seen to be an important way to identify key issues early and set the negotiables and non-negotiables from an early stage. And we heard from a number of council participants about where those processes were working well, including in urban design review panels. Another issue that came up more in the second group than the first was the important role of e-planning and IT in making some of these systems simpler, and also clearly identifying which part of, at times, a 1,000-page DCP, I think we heard of, might be the relevant areas to look at. So using IT better to simplify some of the processes. It was acknowledged that that e-planning rollout needed to happen in a coordinated way and be supported at a state level, either by the Department of Local Government or similar. And that there was a need to bridge the diversity of council systems, and the key message there was start now.
Thanks, Dianne. In terms of potential solutions, there's commonality between the two groups that the New South Wales have not picked up on the Development Assessment Forum recommendations about categorising different development types according to complexity, impact and scale of those developments, and that was seen as a key initiative for this review, and also related to 79C basically encompassing every DA that's not exempt and complying at the present time. That had greater certainty of pathways for what's merit-based, what's objective criteria-based decision-making, and therefore greater certainty for an applicant on the pathway through to get a determination who would be responsible. There was a lot of importance placed upon plan making as setting a far better context for improved development assessment. Obviously, the more that's resolved at policy stage through community consultation, through resolving conflicts, then potentially the more the assessment clarity can be achieved, and councils have greater certainty in the policy context with which to make those assessments. And that relates to the point Dianne just made about the crucial importance of state agencies being involved in more detail at a higher level in the declaration of policies, and also at pre-lodgement consultations, so that all the big issues relating to a DA are there up front at an early stage, and you don't get council consulted early and a whole lot of state government agency key issues coming forward at a later point. There was a mixed reaction to whether pre-lodgement should be mandated or not, but certainly greater means of encouraging pre-lodgement, particularly with major projects, was seen as important. Metropolitan and other state strategies and regional strategies should be the vehicles which drive what is state assessment and what is JRPP assessment. In other words, what applications are going to be of state significance and what of regional significance. So the greater clarity in the roles at state, regional through JRPPs and the levels. There was general support for the performance of JRPPs, although there were some operational issues and some community consultation issues that needed to be tidied up. Also, a greater need for JRPPs to be briefed and potentially involved with applicants on the way through, acknowledging some of the probity parameters that relate to JRPPs. And just getting back to just re-emphasising the point that Dianne made to some extent, there was acknowledgement by local government participants that there are some cultural issues to address. It's quite a reactionary process we go through at the moment, and therefore the new legislation and plan-making emphasis needs to shift that culture more towards planners being more facilitators of good development rather than the more detailed, complex assessment roles that we play at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Next, on the same topic, we're with obviously different groups attending. Lucy Turnbull, who's a former Mayor of Sydney City, is Deputy Chair of the Committee for Sydney and also serves as an advisor to the Federal Government on cities through the COAG process, and also Stephen Albin, Chief Executive Officer of the Urban Development Institute of Australia. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Liam. I'll say a few things and then Stephen will remind me of the things I've forgotten to say. Well, first of all, on a very positive note, there was almost, I think, unanimous, at least nobody said they disagreed, consensus with the idea that there should be standard form DAs across the state so that there should be no variation. So any DA in New South Wales has exactly the same configuration and format and necessary attached paperwork. That there should be a reference to IPART or some similar authority so that there can be a consistent and standard set of what is called now Section 94 schemes, and examination of how to improve those schemes for the benefit of the people of local communities and the people of New South Wales. And there should also be a lot of deliberation about and then an agreement on what constitutes best standard, best practice, public engagement in local communities for considering things like introducing new strategic plans and also for development assessments. And that was those 3 points were very strongly endorsed. There was also, sadly, a consensus that there is somewhat of a skills shortage in the planning system, and I think that's a little bit beyond this planning system review, but it's very much in the background. There was very strong ongoing support for the role of JRPPs. And for the fact that there are separate considerations to be taken into account for developments of regional significance and state significance. There was some suggestion that having a straight instant death $20 million filter for whether things should go to the JPP or be considered as a more regional assessment may be a little bit simplistic, and we note that in London they have a similar numeric assessment, but it's say 50 dwellings in the Metro London. Maybe those criteria should be staggered according to whether you're in the regions or the rural area or the city fringe or the city centre or the middle suburbs. So there's a potential to have a more dynamic metric for assessing regional significance rather than the instant death or life $20 million. Criterion. There are a lot of very positive ideas for speeding up the determination time for DAs, and noting that the speed and the certainty is just as important for all sectors of the community, not just for the development industry, but for community members. That the thing that's actually led to this planning system review being undertaken is a lack of confidence in the planning system, no matter where you stand in that planning system. So there's a strong support for the idea of having this planning system review in the first place. Thank you. Stephen.
Oh, thanks. Look, I think you've covered it all pretty well, but I think the word of the day was hierarchy in our group, and basically the system needed to be well, especially with regards to state significant development, we needed to look at the hierarchy of development significance. There needs to be a lot of cooperation between local, state and federal government. We talked about the London issue and how they actually deal with integrated development in the City of London, and with regards to thresholds. In the paper here, you'll actually notice that they talk about how do we calculate thresholds and how do we work them out. Our group couldn't come to a conclusion on that, whether it was value or whether it was the number of units. I think another issue that we found that between the two groups it was a bit problematic, and it also in the paper is as well, was the public interest in 79C. That'll be something that we'll have to do a lot of work on in our submission. I think the only other thing is, what should the green paper look like? I think the groups wanted vision. They wanted to look at the DAF model and how that actually can be used as part of the future planning system. They wanted clear principles. They wanted hierarchies and responsibilities. They wanted to encourage innovation, and what we should be trying to do is encourage innovation in the new planning system, and develop models for engagement. So that was pretty much what came out of the group.
The other thing that there was just to add a strong consensus for the idea of IHAPs or design panels, and as a way of kind of taking a lot of heat out of planning decisions. So referring a lot of things to IHAPs and planning panels were strongly supported as well.